In this chapter, we will describe different categories of kinesic behaviors. Next, we will explore the impact of facial expressions on conveying emotion. And third, we will compare the functional and structural approaches to kinesics. Kinesics is the nonverbal code that focuses on movements and motion-based behaviors. Humans often send messages without using verbal language. For example, you may be able to understand your siblings or parents simply from the look on their faces. Indeed, we learn our earliest forms of communication through our family. Those are the patterns that are established at a young age. The family structure and the communication system cause the patterns to emerge as their function. Nonverbal early communication attempts take place during the first stages of our human life, as all communication attempts within family members are nonverbal. In contrast, verbal language develops after many months. Here we pick up a new term called intermodal matching. Intermodal matching refers to the process of learning what emotional situations were likely to result in specific facial expressions. It enables the discovering of the cultural rules that help to shape one's own emotion. A wide range of important messages can be communicated through one's face, from using the facial muscles to convey a specific emotion to hinting at specific messages using the movement of the eyes. We rely on, or gather, important information by looking at the face of an interaction partner. When someone appears to be intentionally looking directly at us, we often are aware of it. And so, we engage in gaze behaviors because we are naturally programmed to notice when someone is engaging in gaze behaviors, whether someone is trying to understand our facial expression or to get our attention. Affect display refers to facial expressions that reveal internal emotions in a public manner. The 6 commonly displayed emotions are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. To some degree, the specific affect displays are recognizable across the human experience. The characteristic facial cues make people easily understand the facial expressions of other people. Let us consider how we may characterize those facial expressions. First, we may characterize happiness as smiling and raised cheeks. Second, we may characterize sadness as raised eyebrows drawn together, with parted lips that have depressed corners. Continuing from the previous slide, fear could be characterized as raised eyebrows and eyelids, and stretched lips surrounding an open mouth. How might we characterize anger? We will probably identify low eyebrows and raised eyelids, with a tight raised upper lip and a depressed lower lip surrounding an open mouth, as anger. Surprise may look like an upward tilted head sporting raised eyebrows and eyelids over eyes that are moved down, typically with a jaw that is dropped. And the final commonly displayed emotion is disgust. We may recognize disgust when we see a raised chin with wrinkled nose, where the upper lip is raised over an open mouth with a tongue sticking out. Scholars have debated whether our ability to recognize and make facial expressions was grounded in the universalist position or the cultural relativist position. For definitions, the universalist position refers to the ability to produce and recognize facial expressions as a product of biology. On the other hand, the cultural relativist position is the ability to produce and recognize facial expressions as a product of culture. Based on those definitions, they give us the neurocultural theory. The neurocultural theory states that we have inherited a basic understanding of how to display emotion that is instinctual. Thus, display rules tell us how we are supposed to display emotion within our culture. We display instinctual emotions as filtered through our learned cultural display rules. What are the effects of display rules? Display rules may cause us to diminish the expression of a certain emotion, enhance it to make it appear that we feel it more strongly than we actually are, and replace that emotion with a different emotion. However, one of the effects of display rules is that we may even display no emotion at all. Humans can have both cultural and biological influences on the facial expression of emotions and be able to navigate complicated situations that may arise. By the use of eye contact in a way subtly altering their meaning, affect display enhances emotional expressions. For example, one may make direct eye contact with a rival having an angry facial expression. Or perhaps by looking away with disgust after making brief eye contact with someone. Therefore, our eye contact adds an additional layer of meaning to the affect displays that we use. Our use of eye contact has an impact within a specific cultural context. Microexpression refers to a brief flash of emotion on each individual's face that occurs between the moment that we begin to display our innate emotion and that we begin to override that emotional display into something more culturally appropriate. It is a subconscious awareness of expression. The flash of emotions is incredibly fast and might be just a fraction of a second. Thus, we can subconsciously become aware of this micro-expression and register it in our interactions. Within the early family structures, the first emotional displays may have originated as a nonverbal communication system. Humans would have tried to send messages to each other about something that impacted their lived experience. Consider the evolution of affect display for disgust, which is the affect display for disgust since the early man, is the distended tongue and open mouth. That display looks like an active attempt to spit out bad food. Additionally, the wrinkled nose and closed eyes look like attempts to close the system to any additional bodily contamination. Thus, the practical nature of the facial expressions may have signaled to other individuals that the food was distasteful and should not be approached. Humans could show the affect display for disgust after many years of evolutionary and social history. Affect displays also signal an underlying emotional state. In order to signal an underlying emotional state or opinion, emotional displays through facial expressions were used. It would be understood that when someone made a specific facial expression, he or she must be dealing with something disgusting. Therefore, the evolution of expressing emotions takes place over many years of social evolution. Humans can now show any facial expression, without needing to feel or explain the emotion. Illustrators are the ways in which we use motion with our hands to communicate a message or to aid in the communication of a message. Hand gestures are particularly useful in sending a message. For example, to show measurements such as width and length, we may spread our hands. To indicate trend of increase in prices, we may use the swoop of one's hands. We should also recognize an important function of kinesic behaviors. That is, it regulates conversational flow. Regulators allow interaction partners to smoothly know when it is their turn to talk, and whether others wish to have a chance to speak or to retain the floor. They also set the cadence of the interaction and indicate switches in turn-taking. In essence, people can more fluidly engage one another with far less conversational overlap or missteps by combining gestures in conversations. Having considered what regulators are, we will now turn our attention to adapters. Adapters are kinesic behaviors that allow an individual to relieve some of the energy that comes from stress or excitement. Adapters serve as an indicator of both arousal and/or heightened awareness. Self-adapter refers to using one's own body as a way to occupy oneself. For example, tapping one's leg in class or biting one's nails during a boring conversation. Object adapter refers to using a gadget like a fidget spinner or clicking the end of a ballpoint pen habitually to release some of the excess energy. Other adapter refers to the body of another person that is used as a way to relieve stress through this motion-based behavior. For instance, braiding a friend's hair on a long bus ride, or squeezing a friend's hands constantly during a bumpy airplane flight. And finally, there is body orientation. Body orientation is the kinesic behavior that uses our entire body to perform as we move our torso toward or away from interaction partners. Open body orientation is seen when one faces the trunk of one's body directly at the body of an interaction partner. It indicates an openness or willingness to engage and interact with that person. In comparison, closed body orientation is seen when one turns one's body away from anyone else to highlight the confidential nature of what one is saying. It highlights less desire to interact with another person or even a lack of time to truly engage one another. We may observe variations of body orientation for brief interactions. Sometimes, without displaying an open body orientation, people may turn their faces toward a potential interaction partner. In this case, the impression is that the interaction must be brief or that the interaction is unwanted. In summary, we learned from this chapter the function of facial expressions in human communication. Our hands and bodies are also channels that we use to send messages to others. Gestures are motion-based messaging that produces important social information.